What is the worst case of edgy teenager syndrome you have ever witnessed? We had a guy in our class that was one of those extreme logic type of guys that tried to emulate Mr. Spock from Star Trek. We actually called him that. He pretended to have no feelings whatsoever and that anything that wasn't logical to him made no sense or wasn't important. He was that kid that would say that he didn't want or need friends because friendship was just chemicals in the brain. Same with basically any other emotion such as love. Basically he would throw off these stupid logic comments at inappropriate times. The worst was when the father of a kid in our class died, and while we were trying to comfort him he basically shouted at him for crying, since according to his logic, dead is dead and there's nothing you can do about it, so it made him angry to see the kid grieving because of the death of his father. Back in the Twilight Edward vs Jacob craze, we had gang tension at school. Jacob supporters drew scratch marks on their arms, while Edward supporters drew bite marks on their necks. In my equally edgy protest to this culture, I rocked up to school wearing a Buffy the Vampire Slayer t-shirt and I never regretted one bit. Both Jacob and Edward supporters united and belittled me about how stupid Buffy was. On Facebook people wrote me messages saying Buffy sucks. It was almost cyberbullying, but I stood my ground. Several years later, I can still go outside wearing my Buffy shirt. They can't say the same about Twilight. Me in 8th grade. I wish I was joking. This was around 2006-ish. So edgy kids were basically just called emos back then. I liked Green Day and Linkin Park, but I hated My Chemical Romance because they were posers. I didn't have an allowance because I was a lazy that never did any work around the house, so I just kept the money my parents gave me for school lunches and just spent it on goth clothes and my World of Warcraft subscription. My main was an undead shadow priest. Of course, I even owned a legitimate gothic Lolita dress and would wear it regularly to school. Petticoats and Mary Janes and everything. I laid the eyeliner on so thick that kids would yell raccoon at me in the hallway. I showed people my self-harm scars and would make a great point of reading violent sexual manga in class because I wanted people to see how much of an edgelord I was. I started wearing a pentacle necklace and told the other kids I was a witch and could curse people. Some people actually believed me, and I got in trouble for telling people I had a hit list. The teachers were on high alert with me at all times and would dish out detentions if I breathed the wrong direction. Instead of assuming I was up to the attention-seeking antics I truly was, they were convinced that this underweight little weeboo girl was a total effing sociopath and was going to pull a Columbine on them in a lacy black dress with petticoats and knee-high stockings. One time I got an after-school detention because I refused to remove my coat in class. I was actually hiding a stain on my shirt and was too embarrassed to take it off. And I got another one because I started hauling my book bag to class and refused to put it in my locker, because I thought it was stupid that I had to go all the way back to my locker in between classes, retrieve my books, then book it to class before the bell rang or risk getting a detention for being late. I got so many detentions that I wasn't allowed to go to the school dance. I was convinced that they had it out for me, but I realize now I was just an edgy little that wanted to be defiant about literally everything that adults told me to do. I also wore a tablespoon around my neck, which pissed off my mom because it was her nice measuring spoon. Drew pictures of people disintegrating other people with laser eyes, told people I was bipolar, and pretended that I was this prominent drug lord with mafia connections or something when I hadn't so much as smoked weed in my life. I also dressed up as Alex from A Clockwork Orange when I was 14. I'm surprised I actually had friends during that time. In the 8th grade superlatives I was voted most unique individual and there's a picture of me looking edgy as F in the yearbook. Cop here. Went to a call for a 7-year-old chasing kids around the neighborhood with 2 kitchen knives in his hands. One of the kids' mothers called. I arrive and make contact with the woman who called. She said she saw the kid chasing her son. So she went outside, grabbed the kid, and screamed at him to drop the knives. I found the kid with the knives and his mother. His mom screamed at me, saying that the woman who called had no reason to grab her son and yell at him. She said he wasn't going to hurt anyone and he was just playing. She said her son has ADHD and being touched by strangers is a trigger. She demanded that I charge the woman who grabbed her son. Back in 1998 when I was 14-15 we got taught about self-harming and the need to talk etc. Within a week I would say 80% of the girls in my year were walking around with sleeves rolled up and cuts on their forearms. Just remembered another one. In my form there was this really sweet girl. She tiny and hardly spoke and had beautiful big brown eyes. She reminded me of a squirrel from a Disney film. No one really spoke to her. She wasn't bullied or anything, just quiet and a bit of a loner. As our names were next to each other on the register, a lot of the times we would end up sat together. One day she said I'm her only friend. When I asked why, she said no one else knows she alive. She started crying and I sat and hugged her for about an hour and she said no one's ever hugged her before. As luck would have it, a new girl started the next day and the form teacher paired her up with this girl. For months they would spend all their time together and seemed to get on, but after a while the new girl made other friends and kept trying to involve Natasha, but she wanted none of it. She just wanted it to be her and new girl. One day she comes in with a painting and it's of herself but with her eyes missing, and she gave it to the new girl and said, "This is for you. You've killed me on the inside." After that she never really spoke to anyone again. There's way too many things that come to mind, but I think this is my favorite. This was right after I graduated high school, so I was like 18. My so at the time and my best friend started hanging out all the time with another friend and her boyfriend, who I'll call M. Now, M was a bit older than the rest of us. He was like 23-24 at the time, so it's not like this was some middle schooler acting this way. This dude was an adult. This all started one day out of the blue, when M sat all of us down to have a serious talk about how he wanted to share with us this deep dark secret that he never tells anyone, unless he trusts them. You see, M was not just a regular human, he was a demon. But he kept his inner demon controlled very well and could look like a normal human most of the time. But when he got very angry, he'd start growling and his inner demon would surface. Since the rest of us were normal humans, we couldn't see his demon features, but he described his demonic eyes, claws and tails. You see, he had 23 tails. He would grow a new tail each year on his birthday. I very well remember all of us hanging out on his birthday when he turned 24. At one point he was growling and moaning and rolling around on the floor in pain because he was growing his 24th tail. He eventually told us the deepest, darkest secret of all. Not only was he a demon, but he was the king of hell. While hanging out, he'd randomly and abruptly tell us that he had to attend important council meetings in hell. He'd then sit in the floor in a meditating-like position, with his legs crossed, eyes closed, and channel his energy to teleport to hell. He'd then start growling, moaning, and yelling and teleport back to tell us about some horrible demon that the council needs him, the king of hell, to destroy. And he'd make us follow him to some random spot outside and then suddenly stop to tell us that the demon is right in front of us, and he'd growl, moan and do some super science to transform and grow out his tails and claws, and he'd proceed to battle the demon and kill it. There is so much more to it, but that's the general idea of how full of cringe this dude was. To clarify and explain a bit more, M definitely didn't seem to have any legitimate mental issue. The dude was actually pretty normal other than his whole king of hell thing. He wasn't like a trench coat wearing, dark and evil guy. He was just an average, jeans and shirt looking dude who came off as pretty normal other than being a demon. Honestly, out of the whole group I was the goth kid, always wearing black, big platform boots, fishnets, raccoon eyes, etc, etc. So IDK, maybe he was thinking that would make him fit in. I'm almost certain he started the whole thing for attention, to look cool. When we first started hanging out with him, I was kinda into paranormal stuff, not like demons and but more like I just casually like to sometimes drive out to places that were known to be haunted just to check it out. Nothing serious. So, I think M took it to the extreme and tried to be cool with his whole demon thing. I no longer talk to M really. I'm now 25, and haven't really talked to or hung out with him since I was 21ish. Last I heard from anyone that still talks to him, I guess he no longer talks about being the king of hell anymore, so I assume he's grown out of it. Lol. One girl was totally normal for years in my school. Like, she was quiet, very smart, likable, had a close group of friends, etc. Year 9. About 14 YO. She starts to act funny. We had science together and she started to have a lot of time off. Beforehand, she was never off. And when she was in for only mornings or afternoons, never the full day. Then one day I'm sitting next to her. She tries to pull up her sleeve in a way to grab attention and she had red marks on her wrist. But they weren't cuts or scars. They were the lines of a red ballpoint. She had drawn red pen lines to try and make it look like self-harm scars. I never said anything. She then started to be a bee to her friends and never came back to school. Last we heard she was best friends with another girl who cut for attention and had to be moved to a different school for troubled kids because of her behavior. I think there was something seriously wrong with her mentally and I feel sorry, but it was so odd at the time no one cared.